Welcome back to our study of the Abraham cycle. Today, we are on a very well-known, famous chapter, Genesis chapter 19, which has two parts. It has the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is curious because we haven't heard anything about Gomorrah up until now, but Gomorrah gets destroyed along with Sodom. And then, of course, we have an appendix kind of at the end which is with Lot and his daughters. And we'll get to that. That's sort of kind of like the appendix that we have at the end of the Noah flood story, where we have a similar story about offspring and a sexual sin and drunkenness. Very curious parallel there. But anyway, let's jump in. Okay, so Genesis 19. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning." So this is interesting. First of all, we have two angels. The previous story was very confusing and kind of ambiguous about who is Yahweh, what is Yahweh doing. Anyway, by this chunk of the story, this chunk of the narrative, we have two angels. That's great. And this is interesting. We have two by two. This is a recurring theme throughout the entirety of the Bible. We had two brothers, Cain and Abel. Later on, we're going to have two faithful spies, Caleb and the other one. There's another one who's Joshua. Yeah. Then, of course, Jesus is going to send out his people two by two. We have the two great prophets, kind of founding non-literary prophets, Elijah and Elisha, which then are paralleled later on with John the Baptist and Jesus. And then, of course, at the end, we're going to have two beasts. We're going to have the two beasts. So, of course, Revelation is kind of the devil's parody of scripture. So you're going to have the beast that comes out of the sea and the beast that comes out of the land. And you're going to have the false prophet and the antichrist. So this idea of two by two, it recurs many times. And there's a lot of other examples that I haven't given, but that's just stuff that comes to my mind without thinking about it very much. And he's sitting at the gate. So that means that this is an important guy. So we're going to read that Lot is recognized as being a foreigner. He's not a local of Sodom, but on the other hand, he's at the gate, which means that he's an important, influential guy who is called upon to settle some of the disagreements. That would have been like the place of kind of pleading legal cases and making official judgments for the people of the city and the surrounding areas. And he says, "Come to my house." So right now we kind of get the feeling that Lot is kind of anxious. He's like, "Yeah, come over to my house," because I think Lot, and we get this further on down, Lot knows that this is not a great city. And he says, "Please come to my house. You can eat, and then you can be on your way." This is different than the hospitality of Abraham, where it's like, "Come, stay. No one's in a hurry. You can stay as long as you want." Lot is kind of like, "I'm in a bad neighborhood. By all means, come in, spend the night, and then we'll take you to the bus stop or the train station, the airport tomorrow morning early so you can be on your way to a better part of the world." So there's definitely that kind of sense of nervousness. And he says, "No, we will spend the night in the square." This was the traditional place that you went. You would go to the town square and somebody would offer you hospitality. It says, verse 3, "But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast." Okay, the without yeast, that means you don't have to wait for the bread to rise. So that means it's kind of a bread, so flatbread that you can prepare right away. You make the dough and you cook it right away. Whereas if you have yeast, you have to wait for the yeast to rise. So this means that he's in a hurry. And they ate before they had gone to bed. All the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them, so that we can know them." Okay, so here you have all the men in the city, both young and old. Our narrator is very clear that this is not just a couple of bad elements. This is the way that the city is. And this, even for the Canaanites surrounding Sodom, they would have been scandalized. And of course, the Canaanites are very immoral people. This is, of course, why Abraham later will say, "Go, Eliezer, go back to my land to get a daughter for my son." The Canaanites are not good people. But even by Canaanite standards, what the people of Sodom are doing is really bad. So imagine that. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him. So this is the first time in the Bible we have a door. Now, we had a hatch on Noah's Ark, but that's not really a door. And then we, of course, had the gate of God. That's the Akkadian meaning of Babel, the gate of God or the gate of the gods, because that was the place where the gods would come and commune with humans. But of course, that is a gate, and that is a divine gate. But this is the first time we have a door for a house in the Bible. And of course, this is going to be important later on. Jesus will say, I am the door. And of course, many of the parables and the sayings of Jesus are about houses, right? You light a lamp and you put it on the table so everyone in the house can see. And those who are not in the house are in the outer darkness. They are outside of the house. There was a man who built a house on the sand. There was a man who built a house on the firm ground. Surely many of these parables come from his own experience with Joseph building and repairing houses. He was a carpenter and a stone worker. The saying carpenter woodworking it's not the right translation. He was a builder. He was a construction worker. So anyway, the houses are going to be important. And the idea of the doors, where you're inside or outside of the house, this is going to come up many, many times throughout the entirety of the Bible. So here we have the first time that we have a door in a house. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house. For Lot went outside to meet them. No, my friends, do not do this wicked thing. Look, I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them, but don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof. So we have a sexual sin, a sexual perversion here. And of course, we have the fact that they are very aggressive towards these guests who deserve to be treated with hospitality. So really, when people say, well, the sin of Sodom was X, it's really a whole bunch of different things added together. Of course, what Lot does here is completely unforgivable. Later on, we're going to read about the sexual perversity of Lot's daughters. Well, I mean, if Lot raised them this way, he obviously does not respect them and does not cherish them as a father should cherish a daughter. And of course, later on in the New Testament, Lot was a righteous man. I don't know what you want to do with that. I don't have an answer for that, because here Lot is not a righteous man. Lot is a lousy guy. He's a bad father. He's a bad person. But maybe later on, presumably we have to assume that later on in his life, he did better things. I don't know. But anyway, I'm not here to do a study of Hebrews or wherever it says that. I'm here to study Genesis. So let's take the text that we have. So he offers them the daughters. They're not interested in that. Get out of our way, they replied. This fellow came here as a foreigner. So that's Lot. So they're saying, yeah, Lot, he lives here. He's involved with the government, but he's a foreigner. He's not one of us. And now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them. They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Again, there's the idea of the door being in the house. That is safety. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness, so that they could not find the find the door. The 2 men said to Lot, do you have anyone else, sons-in-laws, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here. And because we are going to destroy this place, the outcry to Yahweh against his people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. And again, they're surrounded by Canaanites. The Canaanites are doing very bad things, but even by the Canaanite standards, the people of Sodom and presumably Gomorrah are just absolutely so terrible that even the Canaanites are just saying, there has to be judgment for this city. And of course, we have this dynamic that God is not only going to save Lot, but with the family. We've seen that with Noah. We'll see that all the way into the New Testament with Cornelius, that God will choose one person, but then somehow that grace, that invitation extends to the people around them. And I think we miss this. Sometimes people are like, well, just because you were raised in a Christian family doesn't mean you're a Christian. Well, maybe not, but wow, what a grace, what a blessing to be raised in a Christian household. People talk about that like it doesn't matter. I was not raised in a Christian household. So, I really don't like it when people say things like that. Okay, do you have anyone who's with you so we can get out of here? So, verse 14. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were pledged to marry his daughter. This is confusing because the Hebrew can mean sons-in-laws, or it can mean the ones who are pledged. And here our translators are like, they're kind of both. He said, hurry and get out of this place because the Lord is about to destroy the city. But his sons-in-law thought that he was joking. Yitzhak. He was laughing, jesting, joking, laughing. It's all the same word in Hebrew. So here we have a third story that has the same word. Remember, we had Abraham laughing. We had Sarah laughing. And here they think that Lot is not laughing, but joking. He's kidding around with them. So they do not take Lot seriously. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished. Now, again, that invitation went to other people. Presumably, they also had servants, because this is an important man. So he would have had servants. That would have gone without saying. It's kind of a detail you don't have to add to the story. People would just know that. When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for Yahweh was merciful to them. And again, even after all of this, Lot is kind of like, but my stuff, I mean, presumably he's thinking of all of his things. And these guys are like, no, you just need to leave. You have to leave all your stuff behind. I mean, if you want to be saved, if you want to save your family, leave all that stuff behind. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor. If your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life, but I can't flee to the mountains. This disaster will overtake me, and I will die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to. It is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." What is he doing? Well, here we have another negotiation. This is interesting because we had the negotiation of Abraham with God or the angel of Yahweh or someone. And that negotiation goes well, but here we have Lot negotiating. But see, there's a difference, because Lot is negotiating for his own comfort. He's presumably an old person by this time. It sounds like he's saying, if I go to the mountains, I don't have the ability to go up there to the mountains and live up there in a cave. And this is not a comfortable way of life for any of us, including us today. Let me go to this little town. He doesn't want to get away from civilization. It's kind of a lack of faith, right? I mean, these guys have saved him, and he's like, yeah, let me go to this town. It'll be fine. 21, he said to him, "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it." That is why the town is called Zoar. So there is an etiology. Zoar means small. This is similar to the Arabic today, Saghir, which means, literally means small. It's a common word in Arabic today. So there you have an etiology. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then Yahweh rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew these cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. So if you go down to Jericho today, you can look at the mountains and see this big, huge thing that's sticking out, and that's Lot's wife. That's what they call it. Did she look back and become a pillar of salt because there was sulfur from a meteorite? I don't know. I am not interested in that kind of interpretation of the Bible, to be honest. You guys know that. But there's, of course, the moral lesson, which is what the narrator really wants us to learn, which is that when you have to leave something, you don't look back. And this is the problem that we're going to find later on with the people of Israel. They have the Exodus, and they look back to Egypt, and they're like, "Oh, we miss Egypt. We miss being slaves. We miss the food. We miss the stability," even though they were slaves. And in the same way, Lot's wife looks back, and she is judged. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and returned to the place where he had stood before Yahweh. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward all the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. So again, he's doing this because of Abraham. So this is important, and that's the end of the story. And now we have kind of like a little appendix. Verse 30, Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar, settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. Presumably the people of Zoar are like, hey, you came from Sodom, which was just destroyed. They probably didn't want him to be there. Maybe they were antagonistic. Maybe they were bothering him. We don't know, but I mean, that would be a reasonable implication. One day the older daughter said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth." Here we probably have the memory of another complete destruction story. Here, like we've read that the cities in the plains are destroyed. But here we probably have a memory of an earlier story where like all of humanity has been destroyed. It's kind of like Noah and his family after the flood. There's no other humans anywhere at all. So there's probably that kind of ancient memory of a story like that further back. Oh, and by the way, I want to say, like, this idea of having like angelic or celestial visitors that people welcome in, like, this exists in many other cultures. Like, we have a Greek story of that where two of the deities go in, they stay with this family, and this family is nice to them, even though they don't know that they're two of the gods of Olympus. And then destruction happens, and they relocate the house to like a mountaintop so they don't get wiped out. Anyway, like this idea, like, that you have these visitors, and that they're somehow either from God or from the gods, or they are gods, or in some way they are God, and that by extending hospitality to them, that somehow that leads surprisingly to a salvation, or a gift or a blessing at the end. That this is, of course, this is what we have here, but I'm just saying this is a common sort of story that we have in many other civilizations and people around the world. Okay, that night they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. The next day, the older daughter said to the younger, "Last night I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again tonight and go in and sleep with our father." So that night they did the same thing. So both of Lot's daughter became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son and named him Moab, and the next one had Ben-Ami, which is the father of the Ammonites. So Moab and Ammon are two of the people who are going to be enemies of the Hebrews or of the Israelites, in the same way that the Canaanites are going to be enemies. So now between the flood story and then the story of the incest of Lot's daughters, we have three of the people that are going to go on to become groups, ethnic groups, tribal groups that are the great enemies. And it's kind of a way of saying, look how bad these enemies are. They deserve the judgment of God. They deserve the rejection. They deserve our prejudice against them because they come from places, all three of them, the Canaanites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites, that are related to sexual sin and impropriety and not treating ancestors with respect and reverence. So anyway, there you have it. That is our study of Genesis 19. Any questions you have, leave a comment. I like every podcaster, I have to say that now. That's all that we have. Leave your questions below and I'll answer them. Thank you very much.